All right, cool. Thanks everyone for joining day two of MBA Spotlight. I'm here with Maria and Ming. Always amazing to be a part of MBA Spotlight, even though I don't get a lot of time to be here full time. But today we have a really interesting topic. We want to chat about MBA and money. But before we jump into that, I have Maria and Ming. Just wanted you all to quickly introduce yourself. Ming, I don't think you've been on a GMAT Club live stream before. Would love to know, you went to Fuqua. What's been your career so far? What did you do before your MBA? And yeah, all that good stuff.
Cool. I'll just do a super quick 30-minute pitch to not bore everyone. So prior to MBA, I was had a few different roles, but primarily in kind of technology space. I went to Fuqua to try to reposition that a little bit. And to be frank, I actually didn't know exactly what I was going to do, although I think I wrote a pretty good response to be accepted into Fuqua on why, why do what I want to do, the typical things that hopefully they're still asking for these days for B school application. After Fuqua, I started with a leadership development program because I really want to round out my business skill set. I was really tech focused, so I kind of knew the technical aspects, but I didn't know the business aspect. And that's actually the general positioning that I had going to business school. And my career actually took a lot of turn and a lot of rediscovery. And maybe I think maybe in this session we'll talk about that. It's not definitely not like a straight path to where you want to land up in like 10, 20 years from now. It doesn't work that way. I have a kind of a North Star and I went to. So after a leadership development program, I took a couple of roles and I got laid off in one role, which has actually turned out to be really good because that got me to rethink what I want to do. And luckily, economy was good at the time, and I pivoted back to tech within product management. So that's me.
Awesome. You mean like your career didn't turn out exactly how you wrote your goals essays? Shocking.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking. What?
Ming,
You
before we go to Maria, I have one question. Did you also have to write the 25 random things, or was that not a thing back then?
Yeah, no, it's always been a thing.
Oh yeah, I heard that. That definitely that few question definitely started after me. I don't know
Oh.
what my my question was, but it was like more in my mind traditional. So like, why you want to do MBA? What do you want to do afterwards? And what kind of let you there, right? And some accomplishment you have.
Awesome.
Hmm.
Maria, we know you a lot about, how you think about admissions, how you help people with interviews and essays and applicant lab, but we don't really know what you did before this. So walk us through your career path a little bit.
I was an international woman of mystery. Um, no, so after college, I went to work in corporate strategy and M&A for a large media company. And so initially, I was based in Miami, working with their Latin American division, and then I was transferred to Hong Kong, where I was working with the Asian division. And within the Asian division, I specialized in India and Taiwan. So anyone tuning in from India today, I wrote the original financial model and business plan for what is today known as Tata Sky. That seems to be that's like for those of you who are not from India, that's like the direct TV of India. And so that was, a really, really neat. I got sent to India for several months and on the ground research and trying to figure out whether or not that was a viable business. And then I went to business school, and my intention with going to business school was just to keep doing what I was doing, but to do it at a higher level and to be able to contribute more to broad-based discussions. Even though I was in strategy, I had a lot of ideas about things like marketing. But when I tried to bring those up, it was like, well, shut up. You're the Excel. You're like the numbers girl. Like, leave the marketing to the marketers. And that really frustrated me. So I went to business school planning to go back. In fact, my original plan was to go back to my employer, my pre-MBA employer. I hadn't discussed that with them, but I loved working there so much. But then in business school, it was interesting. I took a really great class, and I urge everyone to take, if your school offers a class or even like a seminar like this, I really urge everyone to do it. It was a class called Self-Assessment and Career Development. And we took a number of, it was like sort of like beyond Myers-Briggs. It was, a number of, really deep reflection exercises. And I realized that the corporate environment, I'm not good enough at kissing up to work in a large corporate environment. Like I'm too honest. And it makes me really profoundly unhappy to not be able to speak what I think. There are other people out there, like my spouse, who are able to like, toe the party line, and it doesn't bother them at all. But for me, it boils my blood. And so I was like, oh, geez. So maybe I should go work in something a little bit smaller, where that political maze won't take up so much of my emotional energy. And so after business school, also based on things I learned about myself in this class, I went to work for a series of startups. And these were startups that sold products into the television industry. So my previous background came in handy, because when I was talking to the clients, or when we were working on developing the product, I could speak their language. I understood their priorities. And so that was really great. And then, similar to Ming, I too got laid off during the Great Recession. When you're like, which one now? There have been so many. In 09, I got, the 08 it hit. 09, I was affected by that, as was much of my company. And then I found out a few weeks later that I was pregnant. And so, similar to Ming, the layoff at the time, I was like, wow, this is terrible. But it actually did end up being a very good opportunity, because it forced me to say, okay, no one's hiring right now in general, and no one's going to hire a pregnant woman. I mean, I know legally you're supposed to, but whatever. Like, the minute I start showing, forget it. Like, I'm not going to get a job. So what can I do? And so along the way, when I was at HBS, I had volunteered to help with admissions. Sort of, I was they don't have technically an admissions ambassador program, but I was essentially an admissions ambassador, and I was helping people with their applications. And even after I had graduated, people would send me their siblings, their coworkers, their, oh, my fraternity brother from college, and so I was still doing admissions advice on the side, but I wasn't charging for it. And so one of my clients had said, well, Maria, you're so good at this. He said to me once, I don't know what your actual day job is, but whatever it is, you should quit it and you should do this. And so I thought about starting a traditional admissions consulting company. And then I looked into how much I would have to charge to make that a viable business. And it really bummed me out. So then I thought, well, wait a minute. I've had this couple of years in technology at startups post MBA. Can I put on that sort of product manager hat, combine it with my admissions consultant hat? And that's how the idea for Applicant Lab came up. And at the same time, too, I met my spouse in business school, so I can also bring in insights from his from his career today, too, if those are useful.
Awesome. No, that's great to hear. I'm still yet to be laid off, but I kind of like looking at the tech sector right now. It's not a remote. It's not.
You've got time, Souvik. You've got plenty of time. Don't worry, honey. It'll happen. It'll happen.
No, it sounds like it's gonna be great. Like, it sounds like for both of you, it worked out really okay. I'm just gonna quickly.
It's not great when you got that immediately afterwards.
It's terrible.
It's definitely not good. Especially, I know we talked a little beforehand if you have student loans. But that was like, for me, it sounds like it's good for Maria as well. I think that's the best like change in my career so far. Like, I think the path I would have been on if I continued that route would be not nearly as good afterwards. And I think the reason why that is, when I reflect on this, is like, when I graduated, like when I went into business school, I didn't know kind of what I wanted to do. You kind of like fake it a little bit. I think everybody does, and I definitely be in you guys' shoes if you're applying. I'm assuming a lot of people are looking or applying. I think everybody has that mentality. Even in business school, we're trying to discover like what you want to do, and so you don't really understand like what you want to do. But then after I like worked in industry for about 4 years and seeing some of the business side of things, like in a large company, and I think it really helped me understand like what it is that I want out of career and what it is I want out of life. And then when you figure out that intersection, it is really cool. And then I think it really refocused me. And I was just looking for those kind of opportunities. And I was fortunate enough, somebody gave me a chance. Like normally you don't break into product management roles from like, especially in tech, from manufacturing. But after that transition, everything has been like so great. I loved it. That and then I just have after you demonstrate and there's some series of luck, like it really helped me refocus. And so in case that happens, and I know the world, it's a little bit weird right now, but in case, don't despair. I think there is light in the tunnel, and if you look back on it later on, I think hopefully all of you guys would say, wow, that was actually not that bad of experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I had a fairly non-traditional background. I'll just quickly give people an overview of what I did. So I spent most of my career in India. I started off with engineering, got super bored like immediately after. It was not like something that I really enjoyed doing, and also didn't really like the people that I was working with. So I was volunteering with this not-for-profit called Teach for India. So I did that for a little bit. Did some volunteering, but I kind of felt like I was getting more excited during the weekends than when I was volunteering, than during my week when I was doing my day job. So I taught for full time in Teach for India for 2 years, and then moved to an ed tech startup. Did a bunch of ed tech work for thousands of schools in India. It was a really cool experience, but I was making like shockingly little money. So at some point, I wanted to scale that a little, work on problems at a higher scale, which is why I applied to business school. I wanted to get into tech because I felt I was doing tech stuff in a very narrow scope. So I wanted to scale that a little bit, see what it's like to work for big tech, which is kind of what I pursued. I went to Michigan. I did that for my internship. That was also a similar first full time job out of business school. And then I recently changed my jobs again. So, I mean, I've always been a product manager since business school. So, this is the only thing I know. But one of the things that really surprised me is how much people are winging stuff even in their full-time jobs. Like I had a preconceived notion that like in really big tech companies people would have their stuff together. That is not the case. That is like not the case at all. So that was a good learning for me that just because it's a big company doesn't necessarily mean that they have a lot of structure and processes. But I want to like tie back this conversation to the concept of finances and the concept of having a positive return on investment. So for me it was a no-brainer, right? Like I was working for not for profits, I was working for ed tech companies, which was almost a not for profit. So even if I got into like the lowest paying jobs out of business school, I would have still made like a pretty significant jump from what I was doing pre MBA. But I think the returns diminish as the number of years you are out of school. Like for example, now like I'm almost 3.5 years out, and I see a lot of my coworkers who did not do an MBA, right? Like who had maybe some engineering background, like especially Ming, you mentioned, having a PM career path. Like PM is a very MBA optional type of a thing versus like consulting or investment banking, which is more traditionally MBA grad. So maybe I'll start with you first, Ming. Like, what has been your return on the business school investment, and did it kind of like match the expectations that you had when you went to school?
I didn't go to business school to make money. To be frank, if I remember at the time, I think the average. I knew I was gonna be like happy wherever I was at. Because I think at the
Right.
time, Fuco was averaging. I think the average pay was like 120,000 US dollars, uh, which is a lot of money at the time. Was I think it's more than double my pay.
Yeah.
That's definitely attractive, but I didn't go into it, thinking that I was going to come out really rich, and that's my life goal. I went in, and now that I would talk about it, and I had time to rethink. I think I wrote my business school essay on like wanting to make an impact. Uh, Frankly, like I spent so little money even now, that I don't need that much money to be happy, right? Like I want to make an impact in the world, leave a legacy, make the world a little bit better, and hopefully, like, all I need is like make sure that my family's taken care of, and you don't need very much to do that. So like the ROI was never there. From a financial aspect, it was always like, how do I make an impact? And that's why I chased the leadership development program, because I saw like within tech, and I was in a technical services capacity, so writing a little bit of code, a lot of implementation with clients. I didn't see the broader picture, and I think to make a bigger impact, I need to be able to, you know, kind of like Maria, understand like different aspects. And that leadership development program did allow me to see a bunch of different aspects of business. I was making decisions like was like the line I was responsible for had like close to $2 billion for annual revenue. And the decision I was making was like on production side of things could mean like somebody get laid off at a plant, like hundreds of people laid off. If I shifted production for certain things, certain way, like they would have to shut down line. I mean, like those never lost. I never lost sight of that, and that's why I like worked my butt off at that job so that I can hit my revenue goals and profit goals, so people don't get laid off. So the ROI was never asked because was never like the main driver. And from that perspective, I think I did get the ROI. The ROI of like making an impact. I'm continually in my job right now able to make impact. Because I think like for everybody, I think everybody's like at a different place, right? Because I think the GMAT clubs now, I feel like it's skewed the demographics as far as the user base. It's more in India. You may think like $100,000 in the US. It's a lot of money, especially compared to India, and especially compared to where other people from. But I think happiness is worth more, and I always chase happiness, and I never chase the money. And I think it worked out. Like sometimes, like for me, it kind of followed. I'm not the richest of my classmate by far, but I'm happy with that. I'm okay with that. It's fine. I never chase titles. I never chase money. That I think I chase the ROI that I want out of life, and that's all I can do.
Maria, what's been your experience? Not just for you, but also, sorry, am I cutting off a little bit?
No, you're fine. I'll just
Okay, perfect.
so what I've seen is, now that I am 17 years out of business school, I've seen that the people who chased money, in many times that wasn't sustainable because the money alone wasn't enough to keep them engaged, to keep that passion going. If you do private equity because you absolutely love traveling all over the country all the time and meeting small business owners and if that's what you love, then you're going to do well at it. But if you're saying, well, I'm just going to do this because it makes a lot of money, but my heart's not really in it, you're not going to do well. And so I think sometimes I want to let people know that when you see these sort of astronomical mid and late career salaries for certain paths, those salaries only come if you stay with that job for 5, 10, 20 years. And you're only going to do well in that job if there's something about it that drives you beyond simply the compensation. So just a heads up that I don't think that, I realize that I remember being in your shoes. I went to the MBA. I also did not go to the MBA for money because the media industry historically does not pay very well compared to other industries. So I went just to sort of get the credibility mostly, and knowing that if I were ever put in a general management position, I might still fail, but I was less likely to fail. And so that was my rationale at the time. But I think, yeah. Sorry, Ming,
go ahead. Something. No, go ahead. I think there's a little bit of lag on the stream, so
is
please
there?
go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder if it's hitting maybe all of us a little. Well, oh well. People just close your eyes and just listen to my voice and don't look at my mouth freezing. When I did my summer internship in business school, I was at Discovery Networks, like Discovery Channel, TLC, and one of my mentors there that summer was also an HBS grad. And he had this really interesting perspective on things. He said, look, as graduates of top business schools, if we wanted to make a lot of money, if that was the only thing that mattered to us, we could probably do it. And there's probably sort of a baseline compensation level that any MBA from a top school could make per year, pretty much in any role, any industry. That he said, but the delta between that baseline salary and above, it comes down to how much time you're willing to put into your job and how much stress you're willing to endure. And he said, for me, I decided when I started a family that I didn't want that much stress and I didn't want that much time. So yes, I'm not making as much money at especially because Discovery Networks was like the most conflict averse corporate culture I've ever experienced. Like it actually drove me nuts because we would just go in circles and no one would ever say, that's a terrible idea. Let's stop talking about it and move on to something else. So anyway, but I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it. Like there's kind of like, if you're willing to put that in, great, but just realize that it will probably come at a cost of stress. and it'll come at a cost of time. And so I can think of right now one of my classmates who was in some sort of high flying asset management money, some sort of Wall Street thing, who had to quit that job after several years because they were diagnosed with a heart condition, a potentially fatal heart condition, and it was because of the stress. So the doctor was like, you have to take a less stressful job or you will die. And so, I think just sort of, thinking about going into your business school journey, it's so easy to just obsess over that first job, but most people only keep that first job for 1, 2, maybe 5 years for the most part. And then after that, most people jump. So just keep in mind that what I would say to people is try to build a foundation of skills and collect skills and power-ups along the way, kind of like you're in a video game. So then that way you're sort of building towards whatever it is you want to do. And the other thing I want to quickly get out there is the role that luck plays. So, I remember sitting in a class second year next to someone, and I was like, "Oh, so what are you doing after graduation?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going to this website. It kind of just started. It's out west. It's called Facebook, and I don't know." He was employee number 8, I think, at Facebook. And I was like, Facebook, what does it do? And, basically I was like, well, that's a stupid idea. Like, we already have MySpace. Like, what's Facebook going to do? I didn't say that to him, though, of course. And you know what? It worked out really well for him. But then I know other people who went to work at high flying startups at the time, like Groupon, that ended up sort of crashing and burning, or, Rent the Runway, which was a high flying media darling. And now their stock price is like 90% less than where it was at the IPO. So, you never know in terms of like doing startups, especially, like you never know when luck is just going to swoop in. And so to Ming's earlier point, I think you also need to pursue things that intrinsically also give you some satisfaction. So that way, if the financial payout doesn't happen, you're at least like, okay, I've accomplished something that is meaningful to me.
Right. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and disagree with both of you here because money was a big motivator for my MBA because I
Well, for
was doing
you.
stuff that was giving me a lot of happiness and I was making impact, but I was making zero money. Well, I was actually like, it was negative cash flow when I was working for not for profits. I would often borrow money from my parents, which is an embarrassing thing to do if you're 25 years old. So that just had to stop. But I think where I do agree with you is when I see some of my friends doing very traditional post MBA careers, things like consulting, things like investment banking, and I think just within like 2-3 years they get to a state where, okay, I'm making decent money, but I'm also extremely stressed out. Is this worth it, right? Like, I don't think I've ever been that stressed out in any of my post MBA jobs, but I see that a lot, like especially in traditional post MBA roles, which I think opens like a really important debate of like what's the point at which you stop caring about money. So now to ask you, Ming, like you said, you cared about impact, but I'm guessing you had some sort of a baseline, right? Like you still have to support your family, you still have to, think about retirement. Healthcare in this country is for free. Just kidding. So you have to still think about those things, right? So how do you make some of those decisions? That's number one. But number two, how do you know that you're going to enjoy this job before going in? Like product management, for example, is wildly different in different companies, right? I feel like it's like one of the least consistent roles in the world where product management. I've been a PM for like 3 companies and a startup now, and they felt like totally different jobs. So, Ming, like, how do you get into the mindset where you're going into something knowing that it is the right move for you?
Okay. You asked a couple of questions, so let me address it probably one by one as far as my experience. I think the first part of your question was financial planning. The second part is how you vet out the role, if that's correct. On the financial planning aspect, money, I think the baseline money is really important, and I stated that, right? I think after there's the famous articles like after $75,000 US, if you live in the US, probably depending on where you live as well.
Yeah,
But
but
some amount of
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but that $75,000 article was from like 15 years ago.
yeah, exactly,
That
exactly.
$75,000
I mean,
means like
Okay,
nothing.
may
so
not work in
let's
the
say
Bay
it's
Area, right?
150 now. Let's say it's
Yeah, it
150
may be in
now
the
for
Bay
inflation.
Area. It may be different for other countries, but there's a baseline. I don't know what that is, and the reason why I say I don't know what that is like a lot of my classmates got into this like FIRE movement, and I got into a little bit. I don't know if you heard of it. It's like financial independence, early retirement. It depends on like your lifestyle too, right? What is your like cost of living? Like, what is your standard of living? Like my standard of living has like never. I think it has some expansion on it because I have kids now, but I never like I drive a 13-year-old car, right? Like I on purpose because I don't need it anymore. I've driven like the nicest cars out there. After a while, like it just doesn't like do anything for me. I don't enjoy the luxuries anymore. And now I have kids, I can't travel, so I focus my time on spending time with my kids. So like after you figure that out, with your base cost of living, I think it's very easy to figure out, what the baseline to keep you happy, and then look into. There's a lot of you can read a lot of financial blogs talk about like what it is you need to save on a net asset perspective, so that and from your spend rate perspective to comfortably retire. And this is not a financial blog, but like you can do research on that on YouTube, on blogs. There's tons of advice out there. Just sift through it. And on this, and this ties into the second aspect, like how do I know? I think there's a two-part question that you asked here is how do I know like explore product management or whatever role that you may be in, and how do you know like that company? So I'll touch it one by one. How do I know which the role? So when I was going to school, I think it's a little bit tougher, and it's probably even tougher on Maria. I know it's like a few years. It's like in technology, because technology goes so fast. Like when I went to school, YouTube wasn't as big. People aren't putting out as much like information, like really good content, because of the monetization model. But you can do a lot of research on, for example, product management. I think one of the few cool guys out there, was looking at product management a little bit later than me, actually has a blog about how he has been like Amazon or like a Microsoft PM, his daily life. He brings guests on to talk about it. You can really get a good understanding of what people's lives. Just sift through. People put in tons of content on there, like, and I'm sure you're gonna find some blogs that give you a taste what that is like, right? So then you figure out kind of like roughly what the job is like, and then to your point, product management is different, and I worked in several capacities as well. It's different between tech and non-tech. It's called different things, like Microsoft product management, traditional product management, or program managers. There's different career paths. The titles are different. You can explore that on the internet a little bit on the company. There's a lot of great things like blind.com. You can try to read up on like what the company culture is like. And nowadays, I think when I broke in, I think I was just trying to find like any product, and I was laid off at the time. It's like any product management type of role. And hopefully the company's good. And I was fortunate that I really saw the team culture in the interview. Even though I don't have those tools in my belt then, but now I think it's a lot easier to do that research. Just because the resources, it's just much more readily available. Because I think like when I was first interested in business school, and I graduated college a little bit after Maria, like it was literally like you have to go to the library to look at the books to see, hey, what's the HBS average GMAT? What is like their average GPA? A GMAT club doesn't exist. You don't know the application process. If you're from like a tech role, I didn't know how to pitch walk me through your resume. Why this, why that? I think like I was fortunate to get accepted because I think my essay was probably horrible. If I would have read it, I probably wouldn't accept myself. But nowadays, there's so many resources. If you're truly interested, you can find something like over the internet. It is super powerful. So I think, so to break it out, summarize, on the financial side, there's a lot of financial planning, and there is a baseline. If you get paid nothing, obviously that's not going to work. You have to be able to sustain yourself. You got to be happy. You got to carry your basic need and probably a little bit build a little nest for the future. But after that, like if your cost of living is low, it doesn't drive, like at least it doesn't drive me. And then the other aspect on how to do research for a company roles. Again, I think the internet is so powerful these days.
And Souvik, I'll just jump in and say, first of all, you can't possibly know until you start the job. That's why I hate this term, it's a marathon, not a sprint, but it's really true. Like, you might join a company, you might do as much research as you want, and then you might be like, oh my gosh, like the company overall is great, but my particular group is terrible, or vice versa. So, sometimes you just have to take that leap of faith. But I want to transition the conversation a little bit, because I think that the title, the attention-grabbing title of this talk, was about like making millions after your MBA. And so I think, what we can do is maybe we can talk about the people that we've seen who have been financially successful. What are some of the common choices they've made? I mean, obviously the obvious ones are, you go into something like consulting and banking and you hang on for dear life, and you don't have a family. I actually did an HBS mock interview, I think yesterday, with someone who worked in finance, who was like, oh yeah, it was my wife's birthday on a Sunday night, and I got called back into the office to put together some analysis that didn't matter.
Right.
So there you go. Like, if that's, that person makes a lot of money, but if you want to be called into the office on a Sunday night when it's your spouse's birthday, not even to do something important, just sort of think about that. But so I think the obvious paths are, look, you go into consulting, you go into banking, you hang on for dear life, and you either start your own fund one day or you make it to partner. I think the other paths that I have seen are people who go into corporate America and just kind of go up the ranks. I have found that I have seen that people who join publicly traded companies sometimes have more of a maybe the size of the windfall isn't as great, but to the extent that the stock is publicly traded, and if you do get options or something like that, there's liquidity eventually in that, versus people who work for small private companies. My husband has worked for a private company now for several years. He has a lot of stock in it, but it doesn't look like they're going to have. They keep raising money, but it's not clear that they're ever going to have an exit. And so think about that. For example, if you are going to go to a job and you're saying to yourself, okay, I'm going to get that equity, woohoo! It's stock options, let's go. Just be realistic about whether or not, not even is the company itself something that is going to become attractive enough to be a sales target in the future, so that way that equity becomes worth something. But is the CEO someone who wants to sell? That's kind of the issue we're facing right now, is that the CEO of this company is like, nope, I'm not selling. And so I think public company, all else equal, if everything else is equal, I would go the public company route. Although the trade-off there is that it's harder to go to advance in a public company, just because it's usually so much larger. And then the other route I've seen is people try to develop some sort of an expertise in terms of, it could be an industry that you're an expert in. It could be a particular facet of business that you become an expert in. So then that way you have that track record and you can start charging more and more for that expertise. I think early in your career, try to build out lots of little skills, but at the sort of maybe the 10-year mark post MBA, start figuring out what your niche is and then double down on whatever that strength is. So then that way you can sort of you get this reputation as being like, oh, that's the gaming corp dev guy, or, that's the whatever person. So that way you build that reputation within your industry or your field, and you get well known, and then hopefully things take off from there.
Maria, what do you consider financial? Like, so you mentioned like classmates that are doing financially like astronomically well. Like, what do you think, in your perspective, what is like doing well? For example, 10 years after.
Oh, I mean, I was just saying, the title of the talk was something like making millions after your MBA. So,
I mean,
yeah, I mean,
we don't have to, like, I don't really care about the title, to be honest. Like,
but I do. People showed up because of the title. Come on, man.
People also showed up because, like, you were in the video. I think it's important.
They wanted to see your new haircut. They wanted to see your new haircut, and they were like, I heard Souvik's had a new haircut, and then that's why.
Even the title, like when I saw the title, I thought it was like millions 10 years after. It's just a math game, right? You're gonna make that if it's total amount of money that you make. You're gonna make that eventually. It's pretty easy. So it's like, where do you stop? Where do you make that trade off, right? Because after a certain amount of money, like like what is money gonna buy you? I think that's the question that I will ask like those like what is money gonna buy? Is it gonna buy you time with your wife? Is it buy your health? Is it gonna buy your happiness? Well, what is it gonna buy you? Um,
Yeah, I
it's
think, I think I'll take a stab at that. So I think there are a couple of things here. I think number one is not all people, not everybody who is coming to business schools are in a similar demo, right? So you mentioned fire, right, Ming? So like for a lot of people, front loading how much money you're able to make is a ticket to not having to do things because not having to have a job, right? Like I think that's pretty important. I don't really buy the fire argument, but that's one really big motivator. The second thing is also like, we live in at least in America, like we live in an extremely consumerist society. Like, by the way, Ming, you were mentioning like the cars you own. Like I own a bike. Like I don't even have a car. So I totally get that. I rent. Like that's also because I'm not a wealthy person yet. But at the same time, so I think there are motivators in being able to afford things, like being able to afford a house, and things are expensive. Like, I live in Seattle. If you in the last 10 years, Seattle housing market has gone like absolutely batshit crazy. So like a median single family home in Seattle is worth 1.5 million, and I don't think you'd be able to ever afford a home that costs $1,500,000 if you're only making 150K, if that's your baseline. Like that'll forever be out of affordability zone for you. So I think those things become pretty important because, as you do your MBA, there's also the final piece of, what others who you went to school with are doing. And, you would always compare yourself, even though it will kill all the
I
joy.
don't. I
No,
don't.
you
Like,
need to
some
you
of
need
my
to be more.
really good classmates or partners at like the really, really good friends or partners at top tier consulting companies that everybody I don't. I'm just happy for them, and I know people that are like running countries for really big brand, like
Sure.
the top. I don't. I'm happy for them when they do it. It's choice. What you don't see is the choices, and I do see the choices to make because we're in like small group conference, like WeChat groups. Like I do see the choices to make. Every one of them, like they earned it. Like it's a sacrifice that they make,
Yeah.
like either with family, time, stress. When you're jet setting, like all the time and you don't see your kids growing up, that's not a sacrifice that I want, like I personally want to make.
Yeah.
Um, Other people
I think
may want to do that.
And
that's
I think
totally.
I think if I had to summarize, I would say, look, if you go to a top business school, you can make a lot of money afterwards. It's not guaranteed, of course, and it might take you a while. You might work for a startup that is a high-flying startup today and then is bankrupt tomorrow, but you learn from that, you pick yourself up and you go on to the next, and maybe the next one is the one that works. But for the most part, you can make a lot of money out of business school if you go to a top. If you're motivated enough and smart enough to get into a top business school, you could, you're going to be fine. But I think what Ming is saying is like, then at a certain point, it comes down to those choices. But if the question is, can I make a lot of money after business school? Absolutely. And depending on how important that is to you and where you want to rank it, you can do it if you want to. But then just keep in mind, I will say quickly, because I know we're looking to wrap up in a few minutes here. Regarding family, I just have sort of a logistical, we've been talking about these big lofty ideals, but I have sort of a logistical side note regarding family and kids. One of my career coaches when I was in business school, I'd said to her like, oh, if I ever have kids, I want to take like a year or two off to take care of them when they're babies. And she said, no, you can outsource diaper changing, but you can't outsource the conversations when they're teens. And that really stuck with me. And she is absolutely right. Right. So if you've got a baby, I mean, obviously you need to recover. Any women listening to this, like, yeah, you're going to need time to recover after the truck that hits you of childbirth. But if you give 10 different people the job of changing a baby's diaper or giving the baby a bottle, they're all going to do it pretty much the same. But now, my son is 12. And if he comes home and he's like, hey, there's a new kid at school that everyone's making fun of, what should I do? One parent might say, well, are the popular kids making it? Like, do whatever the popular kids are doing. You want to get in with them. And so, someone else might say, so at that point, it's when they start becoming, when they're young, they are physically dependent. but more people are able to fill those needs. But as they get older, because I was like, whatever, once they're like 5, I'm never going to, parenting's going to be a snap because they're just going to be in school. But in fact, as their internal lives get more complex, as they're, psychologically, as they start developing those value systems in sort of pre-adolescence into adolescence, I actually, even my husband, who's a workaholic, is like, wow, he wants to try to find a way to scale back a little now, because that's when you're going to want to be there to have those difficult conversations and to help them try to decide who they want to be. So just keep that in mind, everyone. If you're like, whatever, I'll just take a year or 2 off and then I'll get back into it, and then I'll, being a parent will never impact me again. Maybe just sort of think about, shaping your career in such a way that that you can try to take that time if you want to.
Yeah, I would echo what Ming was saying earlier. When I was in business school, a lot of our I'm not gonna name the consulting company, but there is this one really famous consulting company based out of Boston. They were talking about like how, as a career in that company, you get to a stage where you don't really have enough time to spend with your family, so you outsource a lot of stuff. So you get like people who are going to come and wash dishes for you, who are going to like, help you with your laundry. To me, that just felt really sad. Like, why are we talking about like, what you should do with your home? So I kind of get that. I think it's a question of trade-offs, like 100%. I think the point that I was trying to make is that the kind of people who go to business school, at least for the first couple of years out of business school, they are definitely going to prioritize professional success. And the reason is, going to business school is hard. Like you're out of jobs for 2 years. You spend a lot of money here, and I think it takes for a bit. It takes for you to, I guess, build your family, or understand what really matters to you, to make some of those choices. And some people don't, and some people would continue to be jet setting, and not just because of money, but also because of like that professional success. And I definitely want to keep that in mind as well. All right, we are kind of running out of time. I think we need to do a part 2 of this, where we actually go through like different careers and see like whether it's, are you going to make $1 million like 10 years out of MBA if you're in this career. I think that'll be really interesting. So
But
I'll
you're
tell
going
Inflation
to, yeah.
going, you might, right?
You're
Correct?
going to, unless you go into like the nonprofit sector on purpose after business school, you're going to make $1 million.
I'm
Especially cumulatively. I can't say like
Yeah,
annually, but
cumulatively sure, like
for
cumulatively 100%. Um, go on.
So yeah, and also keep in mind that like if you do somewhat well, you're not going to stay at that 150 baseline forever. Even a moderately talented person with an MBA is probably going to go up the ranks as well. So, or you might stay at that level for several years, but then using that experience, amass the kind of expertise that then later on another company will be willing to pay a lot more for. So
Right.
I don't, in terms of like the stress of like, how do I make a lot of money? If that's all that matters to you, go into banking, go into consulting. And then otherwise, I think public companies are a good place to go. And then if you're going to do a startup, yes, it might be high flying. That's the way. I mean, Jeremy Stoppelman, the founder of Yelp, was in my class at HBS. So. And also, don't compare yourself. You got to be more zen about it, Souvik, and everyone else
I'm not
listening.
saying I compare myself,
No,
but
but I get it. No,
I, I don't blame people who do.
I think everybody does. To be fair, I think I compare myself like the first few years, and afterwards, I don't care. I just celebrate my classmates' success. I think the other thing on making money, to tackle on to what Maria is saying, like if you really want to make money, I don't think MBA makes the most amount of money, especially in tech. I know like software developers will make like a lot more, right? Especially in this day and age, when you talk in the tech, like so tech's like all about RSUs, not as much stock options. So the pile on the RSUs on you, especially like a few years ago when the RSU values are exploding at some companies. Now it's like biting people a little bit. But like you can make a lot of money, not go do an MBA, right? If you're a software developer, that's a very highly sought after skill set. You can make way more. Like why even do that? Why even have the stress of dealing with corporate politics? If you only solely focus on just making money. switch to computer science.
And to that point, Ming, I think it's important to know thyself, right? Because if you love building software and that's what you love to do, then stay as a software developer. I worked at a startup once where there was like this engineer who was super, super, super talented. And so they promoted him to be the head of the department. And after 2 months, he was like, I hate this. I hate managing. I hate people are coming to me with their problems. I don't want to deal with it. I just want to sit in my cubicle and I just want to build beautiful code that does beautiful things. And I don't want to deal with other people. So if that's you, don't get an MBA. Whatever it is, like I think, just earlier I said, try to pick an area of expertise that you eventually start to focus on. That's the same regardless of whether you get a business degree or not. If you're a surgeon or a software developer or whatever it is, just try to find what that passion is and go for it and
Yeah,
really
no,
be excellent at it.
I agree. I think the thing about the software developer, though, I feel like that's cyclical. I think every single age or decade, we have like this one profession who are just killing it, right? Like, I do think there will be a time when software developers like do not make as much money. Like, I think a lot of those things may be automated. I think MBA is really helpful if you like don't know what you really really want to do and you want to figure that out, but also B, you want to be a generalist. I think that's like what appeals to me the most. Like I can pretty much do, if even if you make me a software developer, fine, I'll learn it. I think that's like a really good mindset for me, and I think the MBA has kind of helped that mindset. All right, cool. We are super late. We are just 3 minutes late actually. But MBA Spotlight has like such a tight schedule. I'm sure somebody will yell at me at some point in the next 30 seconds. But thanks so much, Ming, Maria, for joining us today. I'm gonna make sure to do a follow up just in case when you two are available. So I will reach out on the side. But this was awesome. Thanks for spending some time with me.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye.